Dan, I want to just quickly start with you in regards to this Pegasus golf course, which has got many people in the community up in arms. And because you are in that area, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, so I've asked the developer for a meeting to discuss the final redevelopment plans, and I want to hear what he has to say first. And I'm also meeting with the Mayor, Dan Gordon, this afternoon on this matter. Um, Now, just I suppose a community announcement. So the Pegasus Residents Group is holding a community meeting to discuss this whole thing on the 2nd of June. I think it's at the Pegasus School Hall. It was going to be in the community centre in Woodend, but I think there's just so much interest in this that they really kind of want to, grip it up amongst the community. I suppose what I don't want to see is the community get ignored like they did with the Ohoka development. It's going through fast track, and a lot of the community members feel that the local community say was not really heard. So, from my perspective, the Pegasus residents group is well organised, and the government has a fight on its hands if it does let the developer go down that fast track route. But that's all I can say at this
Yeah.
point, because that's all I know.
The thing is, I mean, at the end of the day, though, the developer is well within their means to do what they like, aren't they? I mean, it's their land now, essentially.
Well, I suppose it's just a communication thing. What is planned? What is the intentions there? And I think that's what the community wants to know.
Vanessa, let's move on to some other issues now. I mean, why should Parliament at the moment be defining a gender? And I just think about the other day, I've got a friend who's been quite ill, and he couldn't even get an appointment at the GP. And it just makes me think, is this the most important thing that we should be discussing in Parliament? However, people are really up in arms about this one. What do you say?
Yeah, this is one of those issues that can sometimes catch people's attention. Uh, this is a members' bill, and so that's different from what government business is, and that is often something that will be a real passionate interest for a member or a group of people who've brought it via a member. And it's true that a lot of people supported New Zealand First, who are the ones who brought this, and so their perspectives are coming through in this bill. And although my personal opinion on it is not really aligned with it, but I've certainly had a lot of correspondence from people who are really fired up about it. It is something where actually it sounds really straightforward, but actually it's not. And this bill potentially has some issues, and that's why National has said we'll support it through to the Select Committee and see if we can sort out the issues that have come to light around it.
So what is your interpretation of the issues? Because from my understanding, even if we do have the definition of what a woman or a man is in law, there's not exactly any punishments for those who go outside of it, though, is there? So I'm just trying to work out the whole point.
That's one of the things, is that there's not a huge number of laws where a man and a woman is defined, or is, there's differential treatment, and we've deliberately done that in law to not have gendered language. And so there's only a limited number of legislation where it actually is relevant to. And one of the problems is that it may actually lead to age discrimination. So in law, I know, weird, eh? So
How?
if in law, if an age is not written down, then an adult is taken to be someone over the age of 20. And so by defining a woman as an adult female, then actually, or an adult male as an adult male, then actually that may lead to some problems with access to some types of legal remedies for people. So that's an unintended consequence. And that's the problem with making laws, is that you've got to define the problem first. And this is an issue where I feel like the problem's not well defined, and also where the remedy may actually cause more problems than it creates, because there will still be issues around transgender people. And the other thing is that people talk about a biological reality of male and woman, but actually, in truth, it's not as simple as that, because there are people that we call intersex who are have variations of that, and that's not a pathology, that's not a disease, that's just the way they were born. And so that's about 1 to 2% of the population, and that's the way it's always been.
But isn't that a bit of a red? But isn't that just a bit of a red herring? Because the issue here, from what I understand, is that many people, and ironically women's rights people, Dan, are just over the fact that the erasure of the word woman, and even some of our government documents now. I mean, I always have a look when I get information from Health New Zealand about pregnancy, and it didn't even have the word woman in it. And you think, well, come on, guys, if you can't define what a woman is, and we're erasing the word woman because of hurt feelings, we've got a problem, don't we? Or chest feeding. I mean, chest feeding, come on. Is that, from what I understand, that's just part of the problem, though, the erasure of what women say is their legal right to be defined as a woman. And we've now got government documents that don't even have the guts to say what a woman is in a pregnancy document from Health NZ.
Look, Chris, yeah, to be clear, Labor doesn't support this bill, and I think most New Zealanders will be asking right now, at a time, when the price of food is through the roof, power bills are climbing, and petrol is biting, and small businesses are really struggling, why is the government choosing to spend time on this? And Parliament's time is limited, and every hour we spend on something like this is an hour that we're not spending on bringing down the costs of living and helping people get ahead. And right now, that's what families are crying out for, not this kind of stuff. And I want to point out that, Labor stands by transgender, intersex, our non-binary whānau, and the wider rainbow community. Everyone deserves dignity and respect and to feel safe. So for this, it comes down to priorities and that valuable house time, focusing on real pressures people face every day and not supporting legislation that risks dividing our communities without actually solving any real problems. So the question here is, what problem does this actually fix for a family who can't afford their groceries this week?
I don't disagree. I mean, as I was saying, I had a friend who was seriously ill and couldn't get go to the doctor for a month, and ended up in ED. And I was watching this bill, going through Parliament in the hospital, thinking, really, this is what we're discussing. However, people are up in arms about this. As you've said, Vanessa, you've been obviously have had a lot of correspondence from people on this. And in your interpretation, in your perspective, what's the main concern they have? Because the one that I'm getting loud and clear is that people feel like it's the erasure of biology.
Yeah, that's what.
Just briefly.
What I'm seeing a lot. Yes, absolutely. That's what people are saying, and also the safety that women feel in public spaces.
Yep. All right, well, we'll watch this with interest. I want to quickly move on to Labor's announcement, of course, the Future Fund that was in October last year. Hipkins and the Labour Party, Dan, has been calling this the cornerstone of the party's job strategy, but when you can't define what assets or what state assets we want to be clipping the ticket from to help create these jobs, how can voters trust a policy if one of the most basic details is missing?
Yeah, look, so we've been really upfront about this, that the detailed settings of the Future Fund will be worked through after the election, because getting it right absolutely matters, and there are real commercial sensitivities here, and we're not going to just lump assets into a fund without properly understanding the impacts, and that's exactly how governments get themselves into trouble. And frankly, we've seen what happens when this government doesn't do their homework. They didn't understand the cost of the landlord tax breaks, and they've blown $1 billion on these ferries, and now taxpayers are left picking up the tab. So we're taking a different approach, Chris. Careful, considered, focused on the long-term value for New Zealand. And the Future Fund, it's about backing Kiwi businesses, creating jobs at home, and making sure our assets are working for New Zealanders and not being sold off or run down. So the difference here is we're choosing to do the work up front and not make decisions blind and trying to fix the mess later. So the jobs piece, we're not going to pluck a number out of thin air just to win a headline. That's not how you build serious.
But in a way, having said that, you've plucked a policy out of thin air with no data or modelling to suggest how it works, and you're telling the good people of New Zealand, just trust us until after the election, until we've got the figures, then we'll let you know then. When you're plucking a policy out of thin air...
I think that's absolutely arrogant to say that the people of New Zealand don't care about this. I think a lot of people are really engaged with how their taxpayer money is spent, especially when times are tough and they're having to tighten their belt. They look really hard at that tax bill and think, actually, what would I rather be spending that money on? And when they hear that actually Labor's got this plan that potentially there's going to be a $3 billion hole in it over 3 years, because they've got no idea how they would make up for that money. So that all of the dividends that are coming from state-owned enterprises and various different entities and companies, they are all going into funding hospitals and schools and frontline workforce. So I don't see how they're going to.
But they're losing their jobs, Vanessa.
If they're not going to turn that money, if they're not going to be getting that money from into the consolidated fund out of that, they're going to have to find it from taxing people more. And that's the thing. They've already talked about a capital gains tax for free GP appointments that aren't going to be able to be sustained. And the GP workforce, they're absolutely
it's nonsense.
Crying out with how the hell they would possibly do that, because these guys don't know about the basics of supply and demand. If you drop the price to something, then demand goes up, and demand for general practice is already through the roof. So this is just another example of basic economic theory and understanding that these guys just haven't grasped.
Now, Dan, I'll give you the right reply just briefly. Go.
It's an absolute smokescreen. The detailed modelling is something that you do properly with officials, not something you rush out half-baked and then try and fix later on like this national government's doing.
But hasn't Labor rushed out something half-baked without the data that goes behind the policy, though, Dan?
No, this is about doing it right. You've got to build sustainable job growth over time and not chase short-term numbers. You need to do this work when you have the horsepower behind you to actually do it properly. And this smoke screen that Vanessa's throwing up and her mob are throwing up is just nonsense.
It's just the basics of the income that comes into the government funds then is spent on basic services. So if that money is then taken out of a consolidated fund to put into another fund that isn't used for that, then the money has either had to be borrowed or it has to be coming from tax.
I just find that rich. You've given tax cuts to landlords.
That's exactly the way it works.
It's absolutely rich of you, Vanessa, to say that.
Works. It's just how it works.
I want to move on just briefly. 9,000 public service jobs or sector jobs facing the axe. The government says this will save about $2.4 billion in savings. Vanessa, what I want to ask you, in terms of this though, is the government then saying that these 9,000 jobs are not necessary, that we've got wastage here from these 9,000 public sector service jobs? They're sitting there, going on Facebook all day and doing nothing else. What are they doing? Who are these people in these jobs, and why don't we need them? Is what I want to know.
We've got 39 ministries and departments, and if you look at the map of all of the different responsibilities and roles and overlaps, it's an incredibly complex system, and there's a lot of duplication of effort. There's a whole lot of extra regulation that potentially is done by more than one agency. So what we're going to do is actually simplify things so that we don't need as much incredible amount of variation. The other thing is that we've got 39 replicated HR departments for the governments, all of these kind of things.
Oh, cut those immediately. HR.
Yeah,
human remains.
So there is actually a huge opportunity. The other thing is that the public service grew by 18,000 people over 6 years under Labor, which was massively out of line with the growth of the general workforce. That's about a 30% growth in a small amount of time, and that is paid for out of the public purse. So we need to be able to rationalise that and bring it back into more of the historical norms.
Dan, doesn't sound so bad.
So what Vanessa is reading out is National Party backbench lines that I've been hearing all week in the House. The government hasn't told New Zealanders which services will be cut, but they're making it, they're talking about thousands of jobs and, billions of savings. Those two things don't sit together without consequences. And we need a public service that actually delivers for New Zealanders.
Well, couldn't the consequence, Dan, sorry to interrupt, be more efficiency? Because we know that there's so much bureaucrats that, you create an industry and you create many jobs. And let me just give you an example. I've been in this town for many years now, and we had so many agencies following the earthquakes that did nothing but clip tickets, Regenerate Christchurch, Development Christchurch, all these agencies that were, government agencies that eventually folded because they were either useless or didn't really do much, and there was too much duplication. And even then at Labour, Mayor Leon Dalzell admitted that the government had a way of creating so many agencies with so much duplication, so much overlay, and the only reason why these agencies eventually disbanded was because they didn't actually require them anymore to do anything. And the earthquakes and the outcome of the earthquakes started to dissipate. So I can kind of see where, you give government bureaucrats an agency and they'll create jobs. Don't you worry about that.
Yeah, no one wants duplication, but you got to look at the public services that are going to be cut. Things like customs staff, social workers, people in our health system. This back office bureaucrat nonsense. These are people in the back office that make sure our police services are equipped with the right equipment at the right time to respond to the right, incidences in our community. So cutting them back just doesn't make sense. And until, Vanessa and her mob can clearly explain what services will be lost, I think New Zealanders are right to be worried about what this really means on the ground in our communities.
I can assure people that frontline services will not be lost. This is about back office duplication. This is not about, and this will not affect teachers, doctors, nurses, police, defence force, anything like that. This is not about the frontline services, and we've been really clear about that. So this is, again,
Vanessa,
one of the union things.
Just a moment, Dan. Just a moment, Dan. We'll let Vanessa finish. Go. Sorry, Vanessa.
Labour and their unions saying that this is going to be terrible loss of frontline services, when it's not about that. It's actually about improving the services through digitisation of many of the interfaces that people have with government departments. It's about improving the efficiency of those departments, just like any business does, looking at the ways that they can actually cut their cloth with the money that they have.
Dan, one thing that was brought up by the Finance Minister, and that was, as Vanessa has alluded to, the digitisation, but also what it really comes down to is AI is taking people's jobs. And this is one thing that the world has to grapple with. In fact, AI is the technology is changing every month. It's getting smarter, it's getting faster, and it's becoming, scary in some respects. But is the government simply only trying to move with the times, partially as a result of AI, Dan?
Yeah, AI is like a fantastic tool. Before I went into Parliament, I was at Joint Force headquarters in the Defence Force, and it did free up capacity. It allowed me to focus on more important tasks, and I think that's what we should be getting our agencies to do. But Chris, this is what National League governments do. They give tax breaks and all sorts of concessions to the wealthy, and then tell the rest of us that there's no money in the pot for services that our community relies on, and it's appalling.
Okay, just finally, AI. What do you use, Dan? Do you use Claude or ChatGPT or?
So I've got ChatGPT for if I want to fix my fridge. I had my fridge break down the other day, or if I wanted to set the dwell angle on my old Holden, I use it for things like that. My heat pump actually broke the other day, so I was able to use.
You asked ChatGPT for your help, yeah. The problem with ChatGPT, it hallucinates, so I don't bother much anymore. Vanessa, what do you use, Claude or ChatGPT? I've been trying to use Claude for research, and it's not quite as bad as ChatGPT. Thoughts? What do you use, Vanessa?
So I use Copilot through Parliamentary services quite a lot.
Is that a Microsoft one? Is it?
Yeah, it is.
And what does that do? Does it?
It helps with emails quite a lot. It helps sort through emails and do organise my tasks and things like that.
It can actually just tell you what's priority or not.
Yeah.
I need this, but is it only a Microsoft platform?
Yeah, and it's a paid version of that through it. And then I also use ChatGPT for personal things as well. One thing it did for me was organise my wardrobe. I took a whole lot of photos of all of my wardrobe, and it told me what are things that I should prioritise and what are things that I should just chuck away. It was really helpful.
Now, that's very interesting. Actually, I have used ChatGPT. This is going to take over interior designing. I've used ChatGPT to superimpose what a new couch from like a furniture store would look like in my lounge, where you can take a photo of your lounge first, and you can take a photo of the couch in the shop, and it kind of gives you a kind of a vibe. It's pretty incredible. Not always successful, though. I did ask ChatGPT my age the other day, and I wasn't impressed, but we'll leave it there. And I packed a sad saying, "How dare you get it spot on, freaky?" I reckon I must have told it. Dan and Vanessa, thank you very much for the discussion this morning. Have a nice weekend. The weather's going to be great, so enjoy it.
Thanks. See you later,
Thanks, Dan.
Chris. See you, Dan.